Imagine what it must be like living in a war zone. Think of those who live in Israel, especially those who live near the West Bank, and just the worry and the fret that they have every day, just going to the grocery store and wondering, is there going to be a shooter? Is there going to be a bomb? Is there be something going to be happening here? And, for those of us who grew up here in America, we don't really think about that too often when we go out. But those who live in war zones have to think about it constantly. It's a worry to them. It's a distraction in their normal everyday life. I'm sure they get used to it to some extent, but at the same time, you never get really used to the fact that there's an enemy who wouldn't mind killing you today. But I think as we draw that analogy, we have to understand that there is a spiritual enemy that every day wants to do everything he can to destroy you, to defeat you, to discourage you. And sometimes we don't even give it a thought. And because we don't give it a thought, sometimes we don't get prepared for the battle that is before us. And in Proverbs chapter 4, I think this is kind of the everyday experience that we need to get in tune with in our hearts and minds, is understanding wisdom, understanding how to apply wisdom to our everyday experience. And I think that is kind of what Solomon is talking to us here about, of making sure that we're on guard spiritually, because every day we need wisdom. And every day we need wisdom. It's by drawing closer to Jesus. As we draw closer to him, we know how to live our lives in a better way. So he says this in verse number 1, Proverbs chapter 4. Hear, ye children, the instruction of a father, and attend to know understanding. There's two specific words that we're going to pick out here in verses 1 through 9. One is wisdom and one is understanding. He says, attend to know understanding. For I give you good doctrine, forsake ye not my law. For I was my father's son, tender and only beloved in the sight of my mother. He taught me also and said to me, let thine heart retain my words, keep my commandments, and live. Get wisdom, get understanding. Forget it not, neither decline from the words of my mouth. Forsake her not, and she shall preserve thee. Love her, and she shall keep thee. Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore get wisdom. And with all thy getting, get understanding. Exalt her, and she shall promote thee. She shall bring thee to honor when thou dost embrace her. She shall give to thine head an ornament of grace, a crown of glory shall she deliver to thee. First 9 verses, I think he's trying to remind us to have a commitment or keep our commitment to Jesus. Now, Solomon obviously didn't know who Jesus was at that point. He was looking for the Messiah. He didn't know all the details of his name was going to be called Jesus. But his focus was, we need to keep our commitment to Jesus. And he says this in verse 1, he says, hear ye children. Notice there's a break in verse number 10. He says this, hear, O my son. Verse number 20, another break, my son, attend to my words. I think there's some specific breaks in the text here, but he says to his kids, pay attention, listen up. And then he says, I want you to hear the instruction of the Father and attend to know understanding. I give you good doctrine. Don't forsake my law. And then he says, I was my father's son, tender and only beloved in the sight of my mother, and he taught me also and said to me this. So Solomon's saying, listen, I want you to understand. I want you to pay attention. I'm going to tell you some stuff as kids, as young people, that is going to help you as you live your lives. And he says, I know what understanding is. I know what wisdom is. And he said this, I got it from my dad. And they would have said, you mean Grandpa David? Yeah, Grandpa David. King David was their grandfather. And he said, he taught me this stuff. Obviously, God taught him that stuff. He heard it as well. But he says, I want you to pay attention. I want you to listen. I want you to hear the instruction of a father to a son. Obviously, we could take it deeper. It's the instruction of God the Father to his sons and daughters today. And he says, I want you to pay attention. Now, he uses a couple of words here when he thinks about this, about wisdom and understanding, and I want you to understand wisdom and understanding. Obviously, we know, as we've taught, it comes from a relationship with God. The smartest man in the world can never have genuine wisdom and live his life with wisdom if he's not a believer. Right? So we have to inherit that. These kids that originally heard this were David's grandkids, Solomon's children. But here's the thing, none of them inherited salvation. They all had to embrace it themselves. They all had to get to the point where they realized that they were sinners in need of a Savior. They were on their way to hell, and they had to turn and they had to embrace God as their Savior, the Messiah that would come one day. And we know that we don't inherit Christianity. None of us can say, I've always been a believer. It was told, the story of Jonathan Edwards. We're all familiar with him and what he did for the cause of Christ, and preacher and teacher, and one who made a profound impact upon our nation. He had a daughter who married a godly man, and they both served God faithfully and lived for God. The son-in-law became the president of Princeton University back when Princeton University used to teach the Bible. Faithful, godly man. They had a son. You may have heard of him. He became the vice president of the United States. His name, Aaron Burr, the man who killed Alexander Hamilton. Aaron Burr, the grandson of Jonathan Edwards, was a womanizer, a man who departed from the faith, wanted nothing to do with it, who lived an ungodly lifestyle, and was most famous for killing Alexander Hamilton. What happened? I don't know what happened. But somewhere along the line, a godly grandfather and a godly mother and father tried to instill, but every one of us, we have to make the choice ourselves, right? We have to decide, am I going to embrace Jesus Christ or not? And Aaron Burr decided it wasn't for him. And what a sad thing. A man who became vice president of the United States, but a failure, because he gave up on Jesus. And so here, Solomon's not saying, hey, listen, because your grandfather was David, and because I'm Solomon, you guys get wisdom. Now, what's he saying? You better search for it. You better embrace it. Solomon could have said, I knew no wiser person than my dad. And these kids could have said, well, technically, you were wiser than him because God said so. But the kids, they could have blown it. In fact, we'll get to it later on, not today, but down the road. Remember Rehoboam? He blew it. Probably never even knew the Lord. What a sad truth. But here's Solomon begging, please pay attention, please listen. Verse 5, it says this, get wisdom, get understanding. Two different words, synonyms, right? They both mean relatively the same thing. They both are wisdom. You can't really have understanding if you don't have wisdom. You can have wisdom without understanding, but in essence, there's two things that are very, very close, very, very similar. They both come from a close walk with God. There's a little nuance, though. Wisdom is often the big picture, right? Wisdom is seeing the practical things. It's making wise, ethical decisions with our lives. It is even simple little things of learning how to drive and how to tie your shoe, like simple little things like that. But it's knowing how to be wise in life. Understanding, and he uses it three times here in verses 1 to 9. He uses it in verse 1, he uses it in verse 5, he uses it in verse 7. Understanding, he says, when you get wisdom, get understanding as well. What is understanding? Understanding is a little bit more logical reasoning, a more analytical thinking. It's discernment, it's perception, it's taking a big picture and narrowing it down to my life. Like, I know I'm not supposed to hate the wicked people in this world, right? But when we narrow that down to, that means the guy you work with, who's a pain in the neck, right? It's narrowing things down to it. Here's let me give you a little practical help in understanding this. Men can typically have a 15-minute conversation with somebody on the phone, hang up, and wife says, who was that? I could say, well, it was my mom. How is everything? I can say, good. She's good. That's it? Yeah, she's good. Meanwhile, my wife could have a conversation 15 minutes on the phone, and she could take 30 minutes to explain it. Why? Because she's going to have the nuances of all the details, right? She might talk to my mom later and said, my mom often has done this. Did Ron tell you about? And she'll be like, no. I'm like, yeah, Dad, I said she was good. She's like, now I'm making this story up. She could say, but she was in a car accident. Yeah. She flew through the windshield. She did, yeah, I know. She told me that. She got 45 stitches. She did. She was in the hospital overnight, yeah. She's home now. She says she's doing good, but I said, told you. She's good. Right? You see the big picture? It's wisdom. The nuanced understanding. It's taking wisdom. Both are right? Was she good? She's good now. Yeah, she wasn't good flying through the windshield, but she's good now, right? Nuanced, Solomon is saying, listen, don't just look at the big picture. Look at how the big picture affects your wise decisions today. How what you're going to do is, it's not just right and wrong, it's how does this decision, because sometimes our decisions are right and right. But how does this right decision over here, if I go down this path, it's not a sinful path. Understanding is like, okay, now as I walk down that path, what does it look like 6 months from now? If I walk down this other good path, what does that look like 6 months from now? That's the difference, I think, between wisdom and understanding. It's perception, which is why, do you understand why God decided that a home is a man and a woman? You need each other, and you need the thinking skills of each one, right? We need the big picture, but it's so good to have the detailed picture as well and understand those things. And I think that's kind of what Solomon is trying to get across to us, that our commitment to Jesus involves not just, well, I'm going to choose to be wise today. Yeah, exactly. But in what specific ways? How are you going to be wise? How does this affect 6 months from now? How does it affect 6 years from now? Because some of the decisions we make will affect those things. And when you get down this path, it might be a good path. It's not between good and evil, right? I hope we're not struggling with that. Should I make a wise decision or a wicked decision? I hope we're not struggling with that, though we do. But I understand that we need to make sometimes decisions between better and best. And they're both good. And so wisdom says, let me look at the big picture. Understanding says, and let me look at how it plays out down the road. So he says, get wisdom, verse 5, but get understanding. Forget it not. Verse 6, forsake her not, and she shall preserve thee. Love her, and she shall keep thee. Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom. But with all the getting of wisdom, don't forget, don't forsake, don't miss out on understanding. Exalt her, and she shall promote thee. She shall bring thee to honor when thou dost embrace her. She shall give to thine head an ornament of grace. A crown of glory shall she deliver to thee. So again, wisdom, understanding, discernment, they're all nuances of the same thing. They're all synonyms of the same thing. But they all involve a deeper, closer walk with God. And the closer I walk with God, the more I understand some of those nuanced decisions of, all right, let me think about this, because I'm not sure whether I go here or there. How does it play out? And we talk to God, we seek God. Wednesday nights, we're talking about how we experience Him. How do we listen for His voice to know those nuances? And we need to learn those kind of things. James 1, In fact, hold your place here. Let's look at this, because I'm going to reference this again later, I think. James chapter 1. James writes to us, and he says this, verse number 23, if any man be a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like an old man be holding his face in natural face in a glass or in a mirror. For he beholdeth his way and goeth his way, and straightway forgetteth what manner of man he is. But whoso looketh into the perfect mirror, the perfect law of liberty, and continueth therein, he being not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of this work, this man shall be blessed in his deed. And so God says this book, this word, the Bible, is our mirror. And he says we wouldn't dare get up in the morning, look in the mirror, and like Fonzie say, it's all good, and walk away, right? We have to do some work to our hair and to our face and all kinds of things before we go out in public usually. And God says we don't look in the mirror and forget what we were. We fix what we were, and then we go out. And God says so too. We need to look into this perfect mirror. And every day as we look into this perfect mirror, none of us will look in this mirror and say, I'm sure God is glad he got me, because I'm just perfect. We don't do that, right? We look into this book, and God shows us what we need to change, and we need to change it. It's wisdom. And so Solomon is encouraging us to make sure that we are applying our hearts to wisdom, and God says he will bless us with it. So keep your commitment to Jesus. Verse 10, keep your feet pointed toward Jesus. Hear, O my son, and receive my sayings, and the years of thy life shall be many. I have taught thee in the way of wisdom. I have led thee in the right paths. When thou goest, thy steps shall not be straitened. And when thou runnest, thou shalt not stumble. Take fast hold of instruction. Let her not go. Keep her, for she is thy life. Enter not into the path of the wicked, and go not in the way of evil men. Avoid it. Pass not by it. Turn from it, and pass away. For they that sleep not, except they have done mischief, and their sleep is taken away, unless they cause some to fall. For they eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence. But the path of the just is as the shining light that shineth more and more into the perfect day. The way of the wicked is as darkness, they know not at what they stumble. So he compares two paths. Now this would be an evil path and a good path, right? The way of the wicked, the way of the righteous. In verses 12 through 17, he talks about the path of the wicked. And again, another principle, he says, hear the sayings of mine, the years of thy life will be many. So he says, if you pay attention to what I'm telling you, you'll be safe. Now, he's not guaranteeing that if you listen to God and you follow his path and you're committed to him and your feet are pointed to Christ, you're going to live a long and happy and healthy life. He doesn't say that. It's a principle, though. It's a principle of following God. And he says this, take fast hold of her instructions. Don't enter into the path of the wicked. Don't go in the way of evil men. Avoid it. Pass not by it. Turn from it. Pass away. Proverbs 1 or Psalm 1, remember? The happy man is the one who doesn't stand in the way of sinners, sit in the seat of scornfuls, or walk in the way of the wicked. He reminds us that we're to spend time with God. Don't go near the wicked. And again, that's hopefully not where we're struggling. But we've got to be on guard, right? Just like those at the West Bank, if they're going to a grocery store near that line, if they have to go there for business or whatever, or work, they keep their head on a swivel, right? They have to be careful. At any moment, they have no idea what may happen. You know, Hezbollah may fire rockets, Israel may fire back. There's issues constantly, right? It's not a safe area. And none of us wake up in the morning thinking, I'm going to do evil today. But every one of us wakes up, and the evil one is out to get us. The evil one wants us to make decisions that are not pleasing to God. And so we've got to be careful with it, which is why Solomon is saying, be careful. Don't go that way. Don't go the wrong direction. Don't follow wicked men. Avoid it. Pass by it. Don't get close to it. Again, sometimes as Christians, we sometimes get as close to that line as we can, and say, well, I know if I cross this line, that's... Solomon's saying, well, do me a favor. Get as far from that line as you can. Don't be tempted by that. Don't go near them. Avoid it at all costs. If there's things that you know tempt you, stay from it. And he warns us that. But then he says this, but let me give you the path of the just, the righteous people. Verse 17, or verse 18. But the path of the just, you know what that's like? It's like the shining light. It shineth more and more unto the perfect day. The way of the wicked is darkness. They don't know what they stumble at, right? But the way of the just, the way of the righteous, the way of the wise person, he says when you get wisdom, when you apply wisdom to your life, it's like the shining light. I've used the illustration before here. It's like sunrise. When you got saved, it was like, oh, there's sunrise. But if you were to go out and you were to see a sunrise at the ocean, it's beautiful, it's gorgeous. But when you go off the beach right after sunrise, it's still a little dark out. You got to be a little careful. But as the sun keeps coming up, as it gets brighter, you don't really worry as much about stumbling. And at noon, when it's fullest, it's easy to see stuff. And he says that's kind of like the path of the just. The day you got saved, the lights came on, so to speak. We understood the world and how to live a little differently. But the more we walk with God, the more light we get. Until the perfect day, noon. Now, here's the thing. It's not going to be noon till you get to heaven. It's not going to be the full perfect day till you get there. But how long have you been saved? And if you've been saved for, 5, 10, 15 years, and it's still like 6:30 a.m., that's how much light you have, we need to spend more time at the feet of Jesus in this book, because this book gives us light. Thy word is a lamp unto our feet. It is a light unto our path. Hold your place again. Go to 2 Corinthians chapter 3. This is my favorite passage. It's one that just, I think, is so meaningful to us. 2 Corinthians 3, verse number 17 says this, now the Lord is that Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. But, verse 18, we all, with open face, with honesty, with willingness to come before God with an open face, beholding as in a mirror or glass the glory of the Lord, what happens? Well, we're changed into the same image. What image? The image of Jesus. From glory to glory. Well, how's that happen? Well, it happens even as by the Spirit of the Lord. So what's he saying in 2 Corinthians 3:18? He says, if you and I will be wise and we will spend time in this book every single day, listening to God with open face. With open face means, Lord, speak to me. With closed face would be, I know I'm supposed to have my devotions. All right, Lord. Done. That's not an open face. Open face is, Lord, speak to me today. Tell me what you want me to hear and help me to apply it to my life. We all, with open face, beholding as in a spiritual mirror. What do we see? We see the glory of Jesus Christ. And as we see the glory of Jesus Christ, he changes us into that same image. We become like Jesus Christ. Galatians 4:19 says, until Christ be formed in you. So that we become more like Jesus the more we spend time in this book, the sacred mirror. As we read the sacred mirror, oftentimes God will say to us, hey, you got a spot on your face. And he will tell us what it is by the context. He will say your hair's out of place. Again, not literally, But he's going to tell us what we need to change. As we behold it, as we come with an open face, we are changed into the same glory, the glory of Christ, from one glory to another. Tomorrow, you should look more like Jesus than you do today. And hopefully today, you look more like Jesus than you did yesterday. And how does that all work? I don't know. The Holy Spirit's doing something there. It's even as by the Spirit of the Lord. We can't manufacture it. We can't manipulate it. But God says, if you're wise, you'll spend time at my feet every day. You'll listen to my voice every day. You will do what I tell you to do every single day. Go back to Proverbs 4. So he reminds us that we keep our commitment to Jesus. We keep our feet pointed toward Jesus. And then in verse number 20, he says this, my son, attend to my words. Listen up. Pay attention. Incline or lean your ear unto my sayings. Let them not depart from thine eyes. Keep them in the midst of thine heart. Not the thing that pumps the blood, but your inner man. Take what I've taught you, he says, and make it part of who you are. Well, they will be life unto those that find them, health to all their flesh. And then verse 23, it says this, keep or guard your heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. He says, guard your inner man. Guard who you are on the inside. Now here's the thing. We all came to church today, and we all know one another to some extent a little bit, right? But here's the thing. None of you know me as well as my wife and kids do. And I don't know any of you as well as your wife and husband knows and kids know each other. Why? Because we're kind of a little guarded when we go to church. Not everybody knows every little detail about your life or my life. We know a little bit, right? We're casual, so to speak, at church. Now we know some nuances about each other, but not everything, right? The only way you can know somebody really, really well is if you spend a lot of time with them and you get to know who they are and you get to know them when things are going bad and when things are going good and how they rate. It's the inner man. But here's the thing. I know who I am, and I know me better than even my wife and kids do. And you know you better than anybody else does. And some of the things that you know about you don't want anybody else to know about, right? And he says this, that's your heart, that's your inner man. And I hope you have this intense desire to walk with God in your inner man. But he says this, guard it, watch it, because the inner man is what will eventually come out. That's who you really are, the inner man. We can cover up the outward. So that we've all heard, and as I shared, I think it was last week, a pastor that I just thought so highly of, come to find out that he's, and as they peel back the onion, now we're finding out that potentially he had this other girl on the side, and when he would travel to conferences, he would arrange her to be there, and it would hook up. It was just unbelievable. And evidently nobody knew until like this past March, and then people were scratching their head and like, what's going on here? You know, something went wrong way before anybody else saw it in the inner man, in his inner life. And that's why Solomon is saying to his kids, and that's why God is saying to you and me, guard your heart. Guard who you are on the inner man. We can fool other people for a long time. You'll never fool yourself, and you'll never fool God. And out of it, that inner man, eventually it gets revealed. So he says, guard it. Put away from you, he says, a froward mouth and perverse lips put far from you. Again, he says, guard your lips, guard how you speak. As we speak, obviously, we're going to be very, very guarded in church, right? You ever out working and you let your guard down and words come out that you would never let come out in church? Well, what happened? Well, that's your problem with your heart. Guard your heart, because that's in there. That's the real you. Like, no, the real me is who I am in church. No, not really. The real you is put you under fire, put you under a trial, put you under difficulties, and guess what? Real you's going to come out. Hit your thumb with a hammer, the real you comes out, right? So he says, guard it, protect it, ask God to watch over that. Guard your lips, guard your feet, he says. Guard your eyes, verse 25. Let thine eyes look right on, and let thine eyelids look straight before thee. Ponder the path of your feet. Are they pointed toward Christ? Not just on Sundays. Throughout the week. Are your feet constantly being pointed toward Christ? Ponder the path of your feet. Let all your ways be established. Turn not to the right hand nor to the left. Remove your foot from evil. And do you see how Solomon wants us to realize how susceptible we are to danger? I trust that every night when we go to bed, we all go around and we make sure, somebody hopefully goes around and makes sure that all the doors are locked. And at this time of the year, you can open the windows up, you remember to shut your windows, at least the ground floor windows. Why? Because we understand that there's evil people out there who will have no problem going into houses and breaking in. So we lock the doors, right? Now, if we were famous, not only would we lock the doors, but we would make sure that we might even hire a security guard to watch us. Maybe we have an alarm system. Maybe we have a guard dog or whatever. Because why? We know this. When we go to sleep at night, we're much more vulnerable. When it's dark, we're much more vulnerable. So we all lock our doors and we shut our windows. Again, famous people, they go to an extreme. They hire bodyguards. They hire security guards. They do all kinds of things. They put fences around their house that are blocked and locked. And why? Because we're susceptible. And Solomon says, listen, your heart's so susceptible to sin. Like, I've been walking with God for 50 years. Guess what? Your heart's susceptible to sin. That's why he says, guard it, protect it, the inner man, watch over it. Put the guards on the mind, the heart, the feet, everywhere you do. He says, protect what you're doing. Point your feet toward Christ, ponder where you're going, and stay in this book. It's the sacred mirror. God will help us know how to walk faithfully with him day after day after day. So as we sum it all up, God wants us to have true wisdom. He wants us to have the nuances of that wisdom and understanding of the practical, the details, the understanding of what does this all mean, not just the big picture. Let's look at look at under a microscope. How is this going to play out? What does this mean for me and for my family, and how is this going to play out? Wisdom, understanding, intelligence, all of it plays together. And if we're going to have it all good, it's all going to come from Jesus. It's all going to lean us closer toward him. We're going to become more faithful in our walk with him. So as we ask ourselves those three questions, are you fully committed to Jesus? That's what Solomon wanted his kids to be, although he wasn't always, right? Are we fully committed to Jesus? Are my feet pointed toward Jesus? And daily, are my eyes on Jesus? Because it's easy to get our eyes on the problems. It's easy to get our eyes on the election, our eyes on people, our eyes on difficulties. But Solomon says, no, keep your eyes on Jesus. Guard the heart, because out of it are the issues of life.